Ladies and gentlemen, thank God President Trump is leaving, being discharged from Walter Reed. He just sent out this message: I will be leaving the great Walter Reed Medical Center today at 6:30 p.m. Feeling really good. Don't be afraid of the pandemic. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed under the Trump administration some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago. Oh my God. Oh my God. The apoplectic, hysterical, seething, fuming reaction. Okay, go to the New York Times. This is the other day. The lives lost. You can hit the lives lost section of the New York Times. There's the URL, the link that they devote to the aggregate numbers and the per capita numbers and the cases. Go to the New York Times. You can look at the per capita fatality rate, and you could look at the aggregate numbers of lives lost. If you go and you look at the aggregate numbers of lives lost in terms of, and you just click on the row, you get New York, New Jersey, and you get 7 of the top 10 states being Democrat. I can read you what it is just from the other day. But if you go ahead and you look at the per capita, so Jonathan Swan made a big deal because the aggregate numbers are different for per capita. Yeah, okay. In terms of per capita fatality rate, you're looking at 7 of the top 10 states in the country with the highest per capita fatality rate being run by Democrats. New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania. These are all Democratic-run states, but here you can look. If I show you right here, if I can read this to you, the total aggregate numbers, okay? Texas has a greater population, a greater population than New York by millions of people, and it has half the amount of lives lost. But it's New York, New Jersey, and Texas, California, Florida, Massachusetts, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the top 10 in terms of aggregate numbers of lives lost. The most lives lost. Okay. Then you want to talk about, so 7 of the top 10 are run by Democrats. And then they blame Trump for everything. Then in terms of per capita, New Jersey leads the country by a wide margin. How does Murphy and New York's governor and de Blasio, and how do these Democratic politicians circumvent all of this? But in terms of per capita lives lost, go to the New York Times. It's New York, it's New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. The first 4 are run purely by Democrats. Okay, so the per capita, then you have Louisiana, then Rhode Island, then Mississippi, then D.C., Arizona, Illinois, and Michigan. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So of the 10, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The first 4 Democratic-run states: New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, in terms of the worst per capita numbers for fatality rate. This is the New York Times. Then Louisiana, Rhode Island. Rhode Island is Democratic-run. Then D.C., then Illinois, and Michigan. So you have 7 of the first 11. And so, how is this Trump's fault? And then you look at the nation, the country's total numbers in terms of per capita, in terms of aggregate numbers. New York and New Jersey have close to 25%. Just those 2 states. How on earth is that Trump's fault? I want to know what these or these Democratic governors were going to do, or I want to know what they were expecting Trump to do for them. I want to know what these Democratic governors were thinking. They were looking for guidance and leadership. On March 1st, Cuomo of New York stated, "The risk remains low." He tweeted this out. There's no need for undue anxiety. But when President Trump today says, and by the way, be here at 9 p.m. Pacific every evening, we have the best late night political live stream in all of YouTube. Be here every evening at 9 p.m. Pacific. This is like, we approach 1,000 viewers every night, late in the evening, and it's awesome. 9 p.m. Pacific on this channel. Let me see if I could find Andrew Cuomo's tweet. So I read you the numbers. The per capita statistics are dominated, unfortunately, with the highest fatality rate per capita, and in terms of aggregate numbers, the most lives lost. There's two separate statistics, and Democratic states dominate both of them. So you can't look at the entire country and say, look what we're doing, how we're doing as a nation. We have 50 states. They're all run differently. And the states run by Democrats have been run into the ground. And not just in terms of the pandemic, they also not only have the greatest number of lives lost because of the pandemic and the highest fatality rates, but they also have the highest unemployment rates. Michigan, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Pennsylvania, California have all the highest unemployment rates. Then you want to talk about pandemic, unemployment. You want to talk about also property loss from the peaceful but fiery protests. They also lead the country in 1.4. The majority of the over $1.4 billion in property loss, that's by one insurance estimate, are in blue states run by Democrats. So what do you have no leg to stand on if you're a Republican who is seething and fuming? But let's look at or a Lincoln Project or a Democrat. They're all completely delusional, and everything I said in the Huffington Post and Salon was right. In 2016, I said, look, there's no difference between establishment Republicans and Democrats. Look at the Lincoln Project. Look at John Kasich. But you could look right now, ladies and gentlemen. What was I going to do right now? You could look right now and just look at Cuomo's tweet. That's right. So Cuomo, the risk remains low. Okay. This is a tweet from the governor of New York. Okay. The general risk remains low in New York. We are diligently... Okay, so... There's no reason for undue anxiety. This is the actual tweet from... That's the epicenter now. We have learned... March 1st, we have learned of the first positive case in New York. The patient... the patient contracted it while in Iran. Okay. And then it's interesting. Then Cuomo was saying, all these cases came from Europe. It's like, okay. Even if that were the case, he should have been on top of it. Trump does not have authority to tell a Democratic governor or mayor what to do. So you're completely delusional if you blame Trump for the pandemic or the lives lost. But here, there is no reason for undue anxiety. The general risk remains low in New York. We are diligently managing this situation and will provide info as it becomes available. There's no reason for undue anxiety. It then led the country in fatality rate and also in aggregate cases of lives lost. Okay. New York and New Jersey account for about 50,000, unfortunately, of 50,000 of the 200,000 lives lost. Okay, 2 states. God bless the people in New York and New Jersey. Only the best, amazing people in New York and New Jersey. 2 states account for about 25% of all the lives lost in the country. That's Trump's fault. These are the bluest of blue states. And there's pockets, of course, of amazing conservatives and amazing Republicans, but just like California, there are pockets also. But so Trump goes, I will be leaving the great... Okay, so he goes, don't be afraid of the pandemic. Don't let it dominate your life. This is true. This is true. Democrats want pure... And the interesting thing is, I've heard this from people, and they're like, well, the more we focus on the pandemic, the worse it is for Trump. It's like, why? It's not Trump's fault. The pandemic is not Trump's fault. There's nothing that Hillary Clinton or President Obama or anyone would have done differently. Nothing. Because they cannot tell. First of all, they're Democrats. What are they going to do? The Democrats already showed you. They already displayed how they handled the pandemic in the worst possible manner. The states that are run by Democrats are doing the worst, categorically, without a shadow of a doubt. There's no debate on that. There's no debate that states run by Democrats are doing worse. You can look at the numbers, both in aggregate and in terms of per capita numbers. Jonathan Swan made a huge big deal about Trump looking at the aggregate numbers, and then he focused on the per capita numbers. And it's like, well, the per capita numbers, the national per capita rate is influenced greatly by all the Democratic states that have the most horrendous per capita numbers. What do you expect? You're talking about, when you look at the United States of America, you're talking about 50 different states run by 50 different governors, but the Democratic governors all have the same philosophy. Shut down the states, dominate, make this dominate your life. Okay, they have the highest unemployment rates, and they have the greatest number of lives lost. And you want to compare Florida? I mean, I remember it was Joy Behar on The View, and she was interviewing Ted Cruz, and she was like, well, how come Florida there's no restrictions, and look at... And he's like, well, Ted Cruz basically said, well, Florida's not New York. Florida has more people than New York and New Jersey, or New Jersey. And it's doing better, both in aggregate numbers and per capita numbers. Texas has more people than New York, and it's doing much better in terms of... Texas has millions of people more than New York or New Jersey, and it's doing better in terms of aggregate numbers. All right, it's doing better in terms of per capita numbers, much better. And in terms of aggregate numbers, it's only half of what New York is in terms of lives lost. But they don't want to look at these numbers. And so he says, don't be afraid of the pandemic. Don't let it dominate your life. He's right. He's right. If you, God forbid, get the pandemic, the odds are you're going to survive unless you have a serious underlying issue or unless you're over 80 years old or 70 years old. They want this to be seen as the bubonic plague that Trump brought upon America. That's not the case. Nobody really believes this. The same polls that say, well, his pandemic response, they also say, well, there were polls like, what if Biden were president, would things have been that much better? And no, everybody knows it wouldn't have been that much better, and it wouldn't have been better at all. Because, like I said, what would a Democratic president do differently from Democratic-run states? So, they're going to lose the election, by the way. My prediction about Hillary Clinton replacing Biden still stands. I don't care if it's a day before, I'm still going to tell you this, because they have no chance if they are so inept that they go with Biden, they have no chance. He has zero support among Black and Latino voters. He doesn't even approach Clinton's support, and Clinton didn't even approach President Obama's support. Then you have the issue of zero enthusiasm among the entire electorate. There's nobody who's ever woken up and said, Joe Biden would be an amazing president. He doesn't have an organic base of support in this country. The people, the Democrats who are calling Trump evil and who are apoplectic and seething and fuming, those people voted for Clinton. The independent voters, the voters who are looking at the $1.4 billion in property damage, looking at the gleeful manner in which Democratic governors have shut down their states and still shutting down their states. People want to live. There are people who lose their lives from drunk driving. There are people who lose their lives from smoking. There are people who lose their lives. Unfortunately, there are a number of ways, a good number of ways, a lot of ways in this society or any society where you can lose your life. Every time you walk out of your door, you take a risk. This is before the pandemic. Every time you drive, you take a risk. Every time you go to a fast food place, smoke a cigar, smoke a cigarette, or smoke anything, you're taking a risk. especially if you smoke anything. But I'm just saying, you're taking a risk all the time. And the flu also, people like tens of thousands, almost 60,000 Americans lost their lives in 2016. Did Democrats blame President Obama? Oh, so almost 60,000 is okay. 80,000 Americans in 2018 lost their lives from the flu. Nobody talked about it. So, but like the 60,000 Americans, or 56,000 who lost their lives in 2016 from the flu, that is, nobody worried about that. But the 200,000, yes, you have to worry. Your life is dominated. Of course, it's a serious issue. It's a serious issue, especially most of the people who've lost their lives are much older with serious health conditions. And God bless these people. That doesn't mean that you can't lose your life if you're not older and you don't have a serious health condition, but that was the same issue with the flu. I'm not comparing the flu with obviously the pandemic is far more serious, but don't dominate your life. You could get hit, like, God forbid. There are tragedies that take place all the time. Alcohol is the most dangerous substance on the planet, and it's legal. How many cancer patients, by the way, didn't get their treatment because of this pandemic, or weren't able to get surgeries? You know how many surgeries were postponed? You know how many lives were put on hold for the past 7 months because Democrats and media just wanted to protect you? You could. What if you? I'm thinking of, like, what if you chipped your tooth, or what if you had a horrendous toothache for the past 6 months? Where would you have gone? You couldn't go to a dentist. So, like, what would you, like, people's lives, and then not to mention the economic catastrophe. Because Democrats see it like, oh, well, we're just giving you money. Well, what about the people, like the millions of people who were happy with their work and their lives? Who were saving up money, who were doing like good in their life, and things were going well, and then shut down everything and continue to shut it down because cases are up. Well, okay, that's bad, but like, what happened to just, if you are susceptible, don't you self-quarantine. You don't stop society from functioning. But see, that mentality, President Trump's going 8 years. They are going to dissolve into a political party that doesn't really, they won't exist as a political party anymore after November 3rd. They will be a seething, fuming, hysterical, apoplectic political entity that only cares about acquiring political power by any means necessary. They're already planning on cheating because they already check it out. They're so happy that the election won't be. Why don't you ever hear Democrats saying, I can't wait to hear who won on November 3rd? They're always saying, well, we won't know. We won't know till November 4th. Well, how do you know that doesn't help Trump? They're like, oh, well, because Biden's up in the polls. Well, Clinton was up in the polls, but she didn't win mail-in voters decisively. In fact, Trump won mail-in voters in 2016, or like 3 states, according to the Washington Post, he would have won just based on mail-in voting. You think the mail-in votes favor Biden? Which, by the way, once Clinton usurps him somehow, because it's a political machine, the Electoral College, the electors vote for the person that is left standing in the Democratic Party. Just like when they say, like, Democrats are like, oh, people are talking about Trump being replaced, So you could, even in this stage of the game, you could still replace. But the issue, ladies and gentlemen, is the following. Democrats do not have the pulse of the country. They have media propping them up. The media is apoplectic, seething, fuming. There are about 10 things that Trump never said that people think he said. There are about 10 things that Trump never did that people think he did. They have nothing on Trump, except they don't like his personality. Has he been perfect? No, there have been some policies, like one immigration policy was this family separation was bad. Yeah, wrong. He reversed that. But you want to know what? I can't even tell you what took place in President Obama's administration that was worse. The cruelty and the 100 to 1 sentencing disparities and putting innocent people incarcerated. That's the Democratic side. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden with 100 to 1 sentencing disparities. You want to talk about cruelty. You want to talk about abject cruelty, sadism. This is on the left. This is on the left. Give me your thoughts below. Be here 9 p.m. Pacific. If you want to support my voice long term, to my new Patreons, thank you so very, very much. My Patreon is below. I don't have $20 million in venture capital like some people. Be here at 9 p.m. Pacific, everyone. We have the best late evening live stream in all of YouTube. God bless President Trump, and he's 100% right. You shouldn't let anything dominate your life, except your family and your loved ones. And you don't let them dominate, but that should be your focus in life. People who love you and people who you love. The media is look what Andrew Cuomo wrote. He wrote something that was worse. There's no reason for undue anxiety. The general risk remains low in New York. How do you get away with this? If you're New York's governor, how do you get away with this? Did he lie? Oh, where was the fact check here? Where were the apoplectic fact checkers? You could not have been more wrong. And New York suffered the most, and they had a man running it that was put infected people in old age homes. I mean, we could go on forever, but see, the media is just like his brother said, not your friend. Just like his brother said to Michael Cohen, the media is not your friend. So the media is literally an extension of the Democratic Party. The governor of New York says the general risk remains low in New York. There's no reason for undue anxiety. Nobody remembers that, and everything's fine. With Trump, he's like, you know what, don't let it dominate your life. He survived. He had it. He's 74 years old. And media is like, oh my God, he's downplaying. You want to know who downplayed? New York's governor. But nobody will tell you that. It's right there, actually. And also, Eric Swalwell said, don't wear protective face coverings. He actually said this in a tweet. I mean, these Democrats, they instinctively, they react instinctively against Trump on everything. And then they say, well, he didn't lead us. It's like Democrats would never have let Trump lead them anywhere. Even if it was like to a pot of gold or to the fountain of youth or to a cure for cancer, they would not let Trump lead them. Because they're just seething, fuming, apoplectic, angry. You can't find more angry and delusional people than Democrats or people on the left. You just can't. Give me your thoughts below. Subscribe to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. And be here, people, 9 p.m. Pacific.